In this tutorial you'll learn a little bit more about motion layering, especially about absolute and relative layering. So notice in this scene I have a lady just walking along. So what we're going to do is open up the timeline, and notice here on the motion layer at 0, 1 she has this pose, and as we play along she keeps that pose and her arm moves along. At frame 60 we want her to keep that pose, so I'm just going to double click, creating a keyframe, and it's just going to keep the keyframe of the motion layer that she already has. However, at keyframe 90 I'm going to add in another keyframe. I'm going to open up the edit motion layer, and we are going to change her arm, the position of her arm. Let's get the timeline out of the way. And we're going to create animation of her putting her hand just above her brow to shield her eyes from the sun. So to do so, let's go ahead and grab the arm, and let's use rotate tool to bring the arm up. Let's grab this arm here, the lower arm, move it down a little. Let's move it down in position. Maybe rotate it a little bit. Alright, so now her hand is shielding her eyes from the sun. So let's get back to the beginning and press play. So now you see her arm goes up, but since we use relative motion layer, we see her arm seems to bob along with the original animation. And let me show you how we can fix that. So let's go back to keyframe 90, where her hand comes up to her face to shield her eyes from the sun. And let's go back to the edit motion layer panel and go to set absolute bones. Now since we have her left arm here and we don't want it to flop around as she walks, what we want to do is set the bones to be absolute. So go ahead and highlight her entire left arm. This will lock her arm into position. So when we stop this and play it back, watch what happens. She puts her arm up and she holds it there without the motion layer interfering with the animation. Now let me show you how you can take her arm back down. So we have 90 where she puts her arm up. Let's go ahead and copy that. And let's say we'll hold that pose until 190. So we'll just go ahead and paste that keyframe there. Then here at 210, what we'll do is use reset pose, and then her arm will go back to whatever the pose was that's original for the animation. So let's go ahead and stop and play that back and get the timeline out of the way. So she brings her arm up, and then she brings her arm back down and continues on with her animation. But I didn't like how quickly that blend was between the absolute and relative, so what I'm going to do is this is where my absolute was, and before it would be a sharp contrast between the two, but I can actually extend this out and make that animation a little bit slower. So now we'll see that the animation between the absolute to the relative will be a little bit longer drawn out, a little smoother animation. So we can blend those two together. So let me get the timeline out of the way and we can watch. So you can see how the blending of the motions between absolute and relative can be made possible. So that's how we can use the motion layer to edit our animation sequences using relative bones and absolute bones. In that last video you saw a clone bone of yours truly, as well as a clone bone of a lamp bouncing around and a horse. Now let me demonstrate to you how I actually made the animation for that horse. So we have here, we added in a horse from our actors, and we can just go to animation and go to edit motion layer. Now unlike editing motion layer for biped characters, creature bone requires you to actually navigate to those bones. At first that might seem a little daunting, having to go through all the subnodes to find the actual bone you want to get to, but it's actually pretty easy. So for instance, if we want to move the head around for our horse, let's go ahead and find the head, so we just keep going down, down. And here we are at spline, thigh, thigh. Let's go through spline again. Spline 02, spline 03. Oh, we're getting close. Here's neck. Keep going. Neck again. Let's keep going through neck, neck 2, neck 3, and finally we get to the head. So now we can use the move key to move the head up and down or look around. You can use this to create animation keyframes to create any kind of animation for your horse. And if you don't wish to navigate through all those bones, I'll show you a faster way. With the Edit Motion Layer panel open, just use the Move tool or the Rotate tool to click the part of the body you wish to animate. such as the ear of this horse. Notice that the edit panel was automatically updated to that ear, and you can now use the tools to animate those parts. You can also use multi-select parts. For example, we wish to animate the foot, but we want this part of the leg to move as the parent, so we can select both and animate them together.